Good morning. Last December, we were many, many months into a pandemic that had no end in sight. We saw a constant stream of new video evidence revealing racist underpinnings of our police system and our justice system. And we saw the peaceful transition of power in the US no longer a given. Like I'm guessing many of you, I felt helpless and deeply sad. One day I was reading the newspaper and I saw an article about American medical debt. Millions of Americans have medical debt they can't pay. Astronomical charges to their credit cards that balloon over time, or hospital bills. And I thought, wow, this is really on brand 2020. Thanks for a reminder of just how dismal the world is. But luckily, that wasn't all. This article also talked about how churches were partnering with an organization called RIP Medical Debt to cancel the debts for struggling people. And I thought, maybe we can do that. So I started researching and talking to RIP Medical Debt about how they worked. And I learned that medical debt is a mercy issue. Millions of Americans report having to choose between paying for necessary health care or paying for other necessities like food or heat. And I learned that medical debt is a justice issue. People of color are disproportionately impacted by medical debt. And of course, they were also being disproportionately impacted by COVID. And so it wasn't a huge leap to realize that we could expect to see medical debt in communities of color rise as a consequence of COVID. But it also turns out that buying medical debt is a lot less expensive than paying your own debt. You can buy medical debt for about 1/100th of its face value. And so that's what RIP Medical Debt does. It consolidates medical debt from creditors at a huge discount, and then it just forgives it. No strings attached, no taxes or penalties to the recipient. The debt is just gone. And I thought, this rings a bell. Something about forgiving debts, forgiving our debtors. And so at the beginning of Advent, I began to feel the renewed hope of God's promises. The promise of generosity and love poured out on people who did nothing to earn it. The promise that in the depths of despair, we are not without hope. And so all of a sudden, this policy problem, medical debt, became a holy metaphor for me, a way that I could understand again and more deeply that we do not earn love, but that it is just freely and insanely given to us. And that my task is to wait and to hope and to work toward a day where all our debts are forgiven, and maybe even trash the idea of debts at all. So this careful accounting system of how much I owe and how much is owed to me, that is just meaningless in face of God's generosity. And so the Jubilee Project was born. At FCPC, it became the theme of our Lenten family devotions. Some other churches joined in, and a bunch of my friends, since I wouldn't stop talking about it on social media. And altogether, we put in about $16,000. And last week, I heard from RIP Medical Debt that they took what we gave and forgave over $1.8 million of debt. So 1,300 individuals had their debt forgiven as a consequence of what we put together. Many of you will recognize Ephesians 3:20 because Diane Walton Hendricks often used it as a benediction, and saying, "Now to the one who by the power at work within us is able to accomplish abundantly far more than we can ask or imagine." I'd always heard that as scripture about what God can do. But as I worked on the Jubilee Project, I saw something in that scripture that I'd never seen before. Abundance beyond our imaginations, yes, but not just God's. God's power at work within us. Not only can we be a part of it, but we are the chosen mechanism that God uses to express that abundance. So thank you for being part of that, part of the Jubilee Project, one way to express God's abundance, forgiveness, and joy together.